coming up on Unleash Thyself.
The system, the forces, the structures that we all have to live within some structures don't mind if we don't have room for our intuition, right? Because it makes us a little bit more complacent. While other structures and intuitions, although there are very few that I've experienced anyway, want us to be more connected to our intuitive selves because they see the value and the benefit of that. And I would also say that moving slowly, if you can, is a pretty radical act these days.
Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome to Unleash Thyself, a podcast where we journey into the depths of personal transformation, spirituality, and growth. I'm your host, Constantin Morun, and today we welcome Emily O'Neill. Emily's mission is to empower individuals through intuitive guidance. As a trained evidential psychic medium, intuitive healer, and coach, she believes that tarot, psychism, and mediumship are effective healing modalities. It's her mission to raise the standard of care in these areas. Now, she also helps others tap into their inner wisdom, heal emotional wounds, and navigate life's challenges. Whether it's uncovering hidden strengths or embracing transformative change, she guides individuals towards alignment with their true selves. And we're here today with Emily to have a beautiful conversation on all of this and understand more of how we can take our life to the next level holistically. So, Emily, welcome to the show.
Hey, Constantine, so glad to be here.
Yes. Oh, okay. I have so many questions, but let's start with the first one,
Okay.
which is, what is evidential psychic medium? I mean, I know what a medium is. I know what a psychic medium is, but what's evidential?
Well, I mean, it's kind of a newer phrase, I think, that's come out in the industry, and it's one that my mentors have identified with, which is probably why I also do. And essentially, it's saying that as a psychic medium, while I'm working, it's my main priority and intention to bring forward information that can be validated. So therefore, it's evidential evidence that those who have passed are existing still on the other side. And so the idea is to bring forward specific information that can be validated by the people that I work with without having been given any information beforehand.
Oh, that's powerful. I love that. And thank you for sharing that. So would you say then that when it comes to mediumship, there's a lot, of course, of misinformation out there.
Yeah.
And, there are a lot of fake people as well that try to take advantage of the system. How can one discern between something that's more real than something that's really just out there to grab their money and feelings and attention?
Yeah, there's definitely been a lot of harm done in the industry, whether you're seeing a psychic, a medium, or a tarot reader. One of the reasons I've said that it's important to me to raise the standard of care and to educate the public is because exactly what you said. So many people want to engage in these modalities, but it's like, how do I know that I'm working with somebody who's trained, who is the real deal? And I would say the first thing is, probably don't pick someone just based off their social media profile. I think that there are a lot of people that have really sexy, flashy accounts that have a lot of followers, but that doesn't mean that they're an ethical practitioner or a skilled practitioner. So popularity does not equate to maybe what you're looking for. So if you do find somebody online that you like and you find them interesting, definitely go to their website, and they should be able to talk to you or have something out there about their spiritual journey, their training, their background. You definitely want to look for testimonials, and they should be open to a discovery call. If you're curious about working with them, just like a quick, maybe 10-15 minute conversation so you can make sure that they're the right vibe for you. But I would also say, if you're going to check in with them, don't give them any information about you. So it would be you asking questions about them and their background. And everybody has a really broad background, I think, with their, if they say they're a psychic medium, but there's two themes that I always see. One is, I was born this way, I'm gifted, I just know I can do this. And then there's sort of the second pathway that could blend I was born this way, I'm gifted, with training and development. But you also kind of have a third group that's, I didn't know I could do this. I kind of bumped into it and I sought training to learn how to do it. So it is true that we're all born with this skill and ability. Everybody is. It's just a matter of whether or not you want to develop it or not, but it's an inherent thing within all people. It's there. I don't know about you, but for me, I didn't have, I kind of knew something was going on as a kid, and then definitely as an adult looking back, I'm like, you were a very sensitive child that picked up on a lot, but nobody modeled or talked to me about what's a psychic, what's a medium, or anything. So I just kind of filed it away and pushed it aside, and it wasn't till adulthood that I intentionally was like, no, this is part of who I am, and I can develop this skill set and I can use it professionally or not. So I guess I believe everybody has it within them, and you can develop that skill set if you want to or not. And if you develop the skill set, it doesn't mean you have to go work with the public. You can just use it to help you out in your day-to-day life, to enhance your spiritual and emotional experience, and to just bring some deeper connections into your life. So those are a couple of points that I would kind of make just about this kind of realm of healing modalities.
Yeah, and I love what you just said there as well, because I mean it expands beyond the healing modalities, right? Like the coaching and mentorship and any other type of service industry, where it's so easy these days to just give your money and then nothing gets back to you in terms of what you were hoping for or what you actually need.
Yep.
So definitely agree with everything you said, right? Do your due diligence and have at least a 15-minute call with someone and see if the vibe is there on both sides, right? Because I mean, as a coach myself, there have been people that they wanted to work with me, but I didn't feel the vibe, which meant I couldn't serve them to the highest level.
Right.
So I had to let them go and find someone else for them, right? So that's fine as well.
Yep, it sure is.
Now, you said that. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I also was going to point out that not a lot of people realize that being like psychic work and mediumistic work are actually two different skill sets. And then the tarot is kind of another branch. You might engage the tarot or symbolic imagery or other divination tools, but people that use them aren't necessarily psychic, if that makes sense. They might just be using those tools in a practical way, and it might not have anything to do with psychism. So I always like to point that out for people, because I know for a long time I didn't know. I was like, why do some people call themselves psychic? Other people call them psychic mediums. Other people call themselves intuitive tarot readers. And other people just call themselves intuitives or diviners. I'm going, what the heck is with all these different titles and what does it mean? It's always been really confusing to me. And I think it's confusing for a lot of people.
Oh, it is, absolutely. I mean, we as human beings, we love labels, right?
Yeah.
And then the best part is that every label that we have has a different definition depending on who you ask.
Exactly.
I mean, we can take simple ones like success and abundance and happiness and joy and fulfillment. They have a different definition for everyone, which I think is fine, because again, we have our own perspectives and experiences and
absolutely
we have in life. So I'd be curious. I mean, let's actually break this down, right? Like, what's the difference between the psychic medium, the intuitive healer that you have in your title, the tarot, like all those stuff? Let's see how you see them, and then maybe that clarifies it for people as well.
Yeah, and this would just be my perspective. I think other people have it as well, but there will be other viewpoints on this, and like you said, that's fine. So from my perspective, a psychic is a person who's going to communicate with the living. So you're going to work with your sitter, and you're going to use your clair senses to pick up on information that they didn't tell you about, to help them understand what's going on in their life and maybe some things that might be coming up down the road for them. So it's a psychic and their client working together, the two of them. And a medium adds another component to that. It's the medium, the client that they're working with, and then the spirit communicator that the medium makes a link to. So the medium goes into their past, a certain state of awareness to make a connection with the spirit communicator, and then they make a link, that's what we call it, and then we pass on information the spirit communicator gave to us, and we pass it on to the client or sitter. So think of it like a triangle. There's three energetic points that are coming together: spirit communicator to medium, medium to client, client validates information, and the medium will keep keep going and bringing forward more information.
And it's, I mean, would it be fair to say that that's pretty much what a channel is as well? Like some people call themselves channels?
That's a really interesting question. So obviously mediums are communicating with the dead. We communicate with people who the have system, died. Now, the forces, people who channel that will sometimes channel the dead, but they might channel other entities or other don't mind if we don't or other things like that. Intuition, right? Because it makes us a little bit more complacent. I don't call myself a channel because I think when I get into that realm, although they're very as easily validated or can't always be evidential, and I'm a really grounded, practical person, and I like to in the benefit. I'm like, prove it. How do I know that's real? I would also say I question everything all the time. Slowly, so there are people that will channel like is a pretty radical act, or they'll channel somebody who's deceased that they've never met and don't know, and nobody can validate the information. So channeling, I think, is probably, it's not necessarily outside of the scope of being evidential, but a lot of times, based off what I've seen, it is. I think it's just bringing in information, you become a conduit, and you pass it on. So that's kind of just my understanding of it. I've seen people do channeling work, and it can be really cool, but can all of that information that they bring through be validated if they don't have somebody there to be able to know if the information is true or false? Not always. And so for me, it's sort of like one of those kind of gray areas.
Yeah, because validation is an interesting one, and evidence, right? Because I mean, my background is in sciences. I have a math degree, engineering.
Oh, wow, cool.
Computer science, right? But I've been on my spiritual path for the last few years after I lived a life of being mostly agnostic, right? So I've opened up, and one of the biggest, let's call them challenges I've had to overcome in the last few years, and I've gotten the chance to, is trust, right? Yep. So the idea of letting go of control and trusting in whatever guidance you receive, right? So I feel like, yes, evidence is good, and that's what I was looking for at the earlier stages, but I've gotten to a point right now where trust becomes much more of a factor, right? So then when you're talking about a channel perhaps, and I've had a couple on the show already, and also have had some private conversation with some, it's really interesting because, yes, you might not be able to prove it in the moment, but what I've seen is that it can be proven over time.
Yes.
So, well, hindsight is 20/20, right? So if they say something may or may not happen, whatever the case may be, then you can validate it that way. But it's really interesting. And I know you had, so we talked about the psychic and the medium, and the differences, right? The medium specifically deals with dead people. And I would imagine dead people related to whoever the client is in that case, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay. And what other terms are there? So there's a tarot as well, which is a deck of cards, but how do we work with that? Like,
well, that's really interesting. I prefer to work with it intuitively. I have a background in art and a degree in history and things like that. So my approach to it is, if you can read a graphic novel or take on board any kind of imagery, you can read the tarot. Not all people feel that way. Some people study the religious context study of the original decks and things like that, and that's really, really important to them, and I think that's valid. I think that's 100% a valid perspective. I don't care to dive that deeply into the history and the symbolism necessarily. I just look at the imagery of any tarot deck pretty much. I can read from any deck. It doesn't really matter. And I just let the imagery give me a portal to sort of my other than five senses, and I pick up on information through that imagery, and then I'm able to pass it on to other people. Or I'll have clients, I won't tell them anything about the meaning of the card. I'll just have them look at it and engage with it and see what they come up with. And it's usually a pretty revealing process. I really love using symbolic imagery, or really any imagery. It can be art, it can be anything, to help people connect more deeply to their intuitive selves or their subconscious or unconscious selves. There's a reason Carl Jung was fascinated with the tarot, and because I think it really does help us connect to the unknown, unseen parts of ourselves. And I've definitely seen that for myself. It's a huge part of my self-care and spiritual practices, big part of it. And it's something that I really love to engage with clients. And And it's really fun because it connects them to their intuition. So I can show them images within the context maybe of a tarot spread or some questions, and I'll get them flowing with it, and they'll be able to just give themselves their own dose of medicine or their own wisdom. And they're often surprised, like, I've never done that before. I didn't know I could do it. I'm like, you've been able to do it all along. But I'm just helping you find new pathways to engage with yourself in new ways. It does require a lot of trust. I think that's a component of psychism, mediumship, divination, any spiritual practice. I think belief and trust are pillars of all of those things, and they're definitely part of what I've been exploring and developing my skill and ability is, do I trust the messages from spirit that I'm getting when I'm working with a client? If I don't trust what I'm getting, the whole reading is going to fall apart. We're not going to get anything done. If I don't believe that spirit communicators exist, if I don't believe in spirit, how can I do this work, right? So I'm always returning to trust and belief. And I would add a third pillar, love. I think love is a huge component of all of these practices, and just having an open heart, being able to be very curious, and also being able to not just maintain a level of curiosity about the world, about people, about everything, but also to find the pathway to understanding through love and an open heart. And I feel like that opens so many doors for all of us when I'm not talking about rose-colored glasses either. I'm talking about compassion and empathy and things like that. I'm not trying to spiritually bypass or emotionally bypass anything, but one of my there's a book that I really love called The 5 Invitations by Franco Staszewski. It's a very spiritual book. It's about people dying, but it's about life. And he talks about this in the book. One of the 5 invitations is finding a place of rest in the middle of things. And I think that to be present for what is as it is in any given moment, you have to be able to find your center and your still point. And I think we find that through love and compassion. That's how we bear witness to all that life will bring.
Hey, it's Constantin here, and I want to take a brief moment to truly thank you for being a part of this incredible journey of transformation. You are the reason we are creating this content. I see you and I appreciate you. Your support truly means the world to me. I want to ask you for a small favor. I'd love for you to join our mission by hitting like, subscribe, or leaving a thoughtful comment or review. Your engagement helps others discover these insights, and together we can continue to unlock the power of authenticity and personal transformation. Thank you for being a part of this movement. Now, back to the episode. Absolutely, I'm with you 100%. I love that you added love, because I was going to add it if you didn't. So I love that you did that, because that's what I have found as well. And curiosity, you touched on it, that's a big one as well. And what I was going to come back to as well is the idea of understanding that we actually hold a lot more answers within than we realize. In fact, I argue that we hold every answer within.
Yes.
But we always look externally first before we realize that we can come back. So I love the way you help people, because if you're empowering someone, well, you're giving them the tools to find out their guidance, and you're just there to support them, to guide them in a way, right? To inspire them, to hold their hand a tiny bit, but then they learn how to do it. So that's powerful.
Yeah.
And I know we touched a lot on intuition already. I want to dive into it, because that's a hot topic these days, but also it's super important, because I didn't necessarily think I was intuitive until more recently, and then I was wow, it's pretty cool. So you talk about intuition being a superpower. Yeah. Let's dive into it. Why?
Sure. So when looping back to what you just said about empowering other people, the pillar of my work really is to help people understand that it's a superpower they've always had. It's always been there, and it will never leave you. It's just whether or not we're tuned into it or not. So
tapping into it.
Tapping into it. And we all need help from other people. So even though we hold all the wisdom within us, it can be awakened in community. We can do a lot on our own, but I don't think we're meant to do everything on our own, right? We need each other. Exactly. We need community. And I do feel like part of the reason many of us are or have become less connected to our intuition is because we've become isolated, or we're not connecting with people, or we're not connecting with nature, or we're not being vulnerable, or, all the things, right? We're not feeling the love. It's hard to cultivate curiosity. Maybe we're having a lot of stress in our lives, or perhaps there's just some pretty awful things happening around us. So there's a lot of reasons, or maybe awful things that have happened to us. Trauma, right? So there are a lot of reasons why we get kind of separated from our intuitive superpowers. And everybody's story about what their relationship to intuition is unique to them. And I always try to just take that approach. I know what my journey has been like, but I would never place that on another person, right? Your story of your intuitive relationship is unique to you and is special to you. And your way is meant to be your way and mine is mine. And maybe there's similarities, but there's going to be differences. But essentially, for me, it's that inner wise one, that inner voice, the part of us that will never die, that's always with us. And it ultimately will never fail us. And I've had some people be like, what do you mean? My intuition has failed me. I'm like, tell me more. How so? What happened? And they're like, well, it's not maybe that my intuition failed me. It's that I got an intuitive nudge. I ignored it. And then I wished I hadn't ignored it.
Of course.
And I always say those are the best moments, actually, because that's how you actually learn that you can trust the voice. The problem is again, going back to trust, I've had this intuitive nudge or knowing, and now I need to take mindful action. But what if I don't like what that intuitive nudge is telling me? What if it scares me? What if it's challenging my belief system? What if it's asking me to make a change? And that's usually, frankly, what it's doing, to be honest. It's usually nudging us in some new directions. Now, is there often ease to it as well? Absolutely. Of course there is. Like when I plant my garden, I do it intuitively. Where does it feel like the seeds will grow well? Like I let that guide me. I don't plan everything out to a T. And by the way, I'm a former project manager in the technical field, so I know how to plan things out. So I've had to like really, not that, kind of a similar left brain kind of lifestyle from where you've come from. So I've definitely, yeah.
I was going to say I'm a project manager too. I mean, I used to be in my previous life in the tech world as well. Certified, all that, so I know exactly where you're coming from.
I bet you were really good at it, because intuitive people make outstanding project managers, and for a long time, people would be like, oh my God, you're really good at this. How do you do it? And I would think, hindsight again, I realize now, I was intuiting a lot and modifying plans and anticipating things because of my intuitive nudges. So that, interestingly enough, was where I think I deepened my relationship to it without me realizing that's what I was doing. So it's this weird blend of like being able to live in the physical real world and do your day-to-day life stuff, but also allow this, like maybe so, maybe not, this other space in your awareness for the nudges to come. So I like to use the analogy of like our sphere of awareness, and it is a sphere all around us, and it gets filled with job, family, all these things, right? But I always try to leave enough room in my awareness. I try not to fill it too full. Sometimes I can do that, sometimes I can't, by the way. So there's room for those like nudges to kind of nestle in. If my awareness is just jam-packed with so much material life stuff, that voice is going to get really hard to hear. So I also, meditate every day, a specific kind of meditation, so that I am always connected to that part of myself. It attunes the body, mind, spirit, and emotional self to be open to these intuitive messages, I think. So you kind of train your awareness to some degree. That sounds very rigid in a way, but it's really not. We just learn to, intuitive people learn to notice where their awareness is going and where it's shifting and how it's moving, and if it's like very zeroed in and focused, or if it's passive and receptive. And we just are aware of our awareness, which I think is kind of a interesting way to put it. But that really is essentially what it is. And when I work with clients, one of the first things we do is gain an insight and understanding of where they place their awareness and how that works just on a routine day-to-day basis, because that's just kind of good information for everybody to have, using the concept of draw a circle on a piece of paper and fill it with all the things, like literally like a pie chart. How much are you thinking about these things? How much are you feeling this stuff? So, and some clients have a very full sphere, like it's just jam-packed layer on layer, and other people don't. And so that's just good information for us to have, because that helps understand where does intuition fit into my sphere of awareness, if that makes sense.
Oh, it does, absolutely. I know exactly what you mean.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in today's day and age, we have a moment of pause and then we grab a phone, right? We have a moment of pause, we go online and do something or watch Netflix or always find a distraction. And that's what I found myself doing in the past. And like you said, when the noise is loud, you can't hear much. So the intuition within you, you'll learn to ignore it very fast.
Yeah.
And until you slow down, do less, it's going to be that way.
And I would say, for me, another pillar of the work I do at Blooming Wand is it has to have a component of social justice and liberation for all people in it. And it's like, well, what does that have to do, with our intuition? Well, if we're always tapped into phones and not aware, then we're not aware of our needs, so we will not be aware of that of others. Does that make sense? And so it keeps us isolated. It keeps us somewhat alone. And I feel like it's really important to not just focus on the well-being of self, although that is very important. If we are not full and, taking care of ourselves, we certainly can't show up in community for others. But I feel like, the system, the forces, the structures that we all have to live within some structures don't mind if we don't have room for our intuition, right? Because it makes us a little bit more complacent. While other structures and intuitions, although there are very few that I've experienced anyway, want us to be more connected to our intuitive selves because they see the value and the benefit of that. And I would also say that moving slowly, if you can, is a pretty radical act these days. If you can slow down, tap into yourself, and kind of not be using maybe as much technology because we live in a lot of technology. Not that there's anything necessarily, quote, wrong with that. It's just we do need to make time for quiet, stillness. Connection to nature, I think, is critical because we're not separate from nature. So I know that I want to be a conscientious explorer while I'm here on this planet, and I know that I want to leave it better than I left. I want to leave it better because I've been here, and that's all connected. These are all connected to me, and intuition is very much a part of that. If you think about the old ones and the ancients, no matter what your lineage is, you go just visualizing through your heart space or your intuition going back in time. Intuition was a huge part of their spirituality and their spiritual practices. The symbolic imagery. And I'm really interested in, this is my history brain or anthropology brain or archaeology brain. I'm really curious in the span of human time, how come we got so separated from it? And I know that there are a few things come to mind, but I do wonder sometimes if we were intentionally separated from it for some reason, because there has been a separation, and there was a time when if you even mentioned intuition, people would be like, "Don't talk about that. Like, what are you talking about? Use your head, think, plan things through." So I know that's how I was raised. I was kind of raised with both, but in a lot of ways it was like, don't be a burden on society, be practical, work hard, take care of yourself. And you just need to, quote, think it through and, quote, use your head. And when I was like, no, I think I'm going to start making decisions or leaning more into how I feel, people were like, what the heck? You can't, that's what crazy people do. Or, hysterical women make decisions based off of how they feel, and especially that women shouldn't be making decisions off of how they feel. And I thought, no, when I haven't listened to my gut instincts or when I haven't listened to my intuition, things haven't worked out so well for me. So I am going to, yeah, I can think it through, but I'm also going to make room for feeling it through. And that's actually one thing that I really love to work with other people or clients is teaching them how to feel through things, not think through things, because I'm telling you that's a method that is very, very helpful, and that's your intuition.
Oh yes, absolutely, 100%. I couldn't agree more with that.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I mean, when it comes, I mean, again, like I was raised as a man in Eastern Europe during the
Yeah.
communist time, right? So boys don't cry, put your pants up.
Yep.
There's no feelings involved, right?
Nope.
So bottling them up all your life, and of course you wouldn't tap into your intuition, all of that. So for me to realize I had all these abilities and I wasn't tapping into them was like a huge awakening. And it's like, oh
Mm-hmm.
wow, you know what? Life can be easy. It's just
Mm-hmm.
we make it much harder because of the disconnect you mentioned going back in history.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at all the native people of any continent, doesn't matter where you go, there was
Yes.
always a form of, well, more healers, but
Mm-hmm.
shamans, right?
Yeah.
Shamanism was a big, big thing. And I mean, there's still, there's such thing as modern shamanism. So I'm curious to see what's your take on that, because I feel like, you call yourself a healer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which you are, you're doing mediumship and all of this. In other words, you're quote unquote, back in the day, you could be called a shaman, right?
You know, I feel like I have an interesting relationship to the term only because if I were to call myself a shaman, I would want to connect through with my lineage to know about my people and what the healing modalities would be from them. I'm very conscientious of
Mm.
because a lot of people in America, because we're a country that's born on genocide, that's how us white folks got to be here. We wiped out the indigenous population intentionally, and I'm a benefactor of that. And one of the consequences of being a colonizer essentially is that I have been completely disconnected from my lineage and from my line. Like when my people came here in the late 1800s from various places, I have some Eastern European in my bloodline too. Um, I've just learned that actually. They all said they did not want to bring their practices with them. In fact, it was sort of like leave all that behind and come here and just like pull yourself up by your bootstraps and try to make a life here. And so there was a lot of borrowing from other cultures, I think, that happened, things that were maybe a little bit of appropriation, but people wanting to find their spiritual path. And I think this is something a lot of people can relate to, but thinking like, if it's not going to be Christian or organized religion, what do I have access to? And so for me, feeling into shaman, healer, whatever, that power comes from my ancestors, my healed and wise ancestors. I know they're with me, guiding me through this process. I know that they brought me to where I'm at today. I can feel them now appreciating the acknowledgement as I say that. And I also would say that nature has been a great teacher to me, and that leaning into the elements, all the elements, earth, wind, fire, spirit, water, the trees, the bugs, just like nature has taught me a lot about healing, and that we can call upon their power to heal ourselves, but also to heal others. But I feel like I'm learning more about what kind of healer I am and what I meant to do. And it's really not as complicated as one might think. I think part of what my healing ability is rooted is in the ability to bear witness to something without interfering and to be able to
Yes.
guide the
That's
process
tough.
as needed. Yeah, and I've worked really hard at that. And to also know that I am a conduit for the healing. I am not doing it. If that makes sense. I'm allowing it. It's a
Of course.
co-creation, and so I feel humbled to be
Well,
able
let's
to.
actually let's actually dive in that in us for a
Yeah.
second. It's such a it's a good point you bring up, because everything is a co-creation. I mean, that's how I feel as well. And think of it this way: you can only heal someone that wants to be healed,
Right.
which means that they have a part to play in it.
Absolutely.
And then you're also bringing information from the other side.
Hmm.
So you'd be very arrogant of anyone to think that, yeah, they're the ones doing the healing. Like you said,
Right.
you're mostly a conduit. It wouldn't be able to be done without you in that moment, but it could be done differently.
Right.
And it's really cool because, I mean, what I do, I mean, in my life, it doesn't even have to be healing. It's just mentorship, coaching, whatever. If someone doesn't want the help and they're being forced to take it, nothing is going to really work.
No.
There's going to be little to no progress. And then
Right.
It doesn't matter how good you are, which is such a funny thing to realize, because you could be the best coach, you could be the best healer, you could be the best whatever, fill in the blanks.
Right.
And yet you would get no results with a
Right.
specific people, because the one half of the co-creation or the 1/3 of the co-creation, whatever percentage you think, is not available. So
Right.
that's powerful.
Yeah, it's really it is really interesting, and I do try to meet people where they're at, and I'll never force anything to occur. But if we're open to learning, or if we're just curious about what our own potential is, that's pretty much going to take you far. Like, that's really all that it takes. And I also feel like a lot of people are looking for a magic pill or a magic wand these days. They're just like, one thing that will just change my life forever. Or I know that there's a big push to do plant medicine and things like that, which that's fine. But you really don't need all that. You know what I mean? You just need time and attention. Where are you going to place your time and attention? And are you going to put it on the things that feel right for you? And that sounds so simple, but simple doesn't mean easy. Like, I have to work on what I'm putting my time and attention onto, right? It's a constant adjustment, but it's aligning to your values. I think we have to align to what we value. And a lot of people don't maybe really truly know from their heart and from their gut and from their core what their values are. So, like, I value compassion. That's an important thing to me. I value curiosity. I value patience and kindness. So we have to tap in and tune to our values, and then we can align to them. And then I feel like that is healing and a very transformative experience. So if someone's coming to work with me or you, and we can tell, like, maybe they're not the right fit, it's probably because we can sense, or they've basically let us know that they're not ready to make the commitment through various means or others. So or they don't really know what they want, what they're looking for, what their intentions are. So I always say, figure that out. I can't do that for you. That's something that people need to do on their own. They need to sit and figure out, why do I want a coach? Why do I want a healer? What am I looking for? What's my motivation? But I will also say that on the other end, I have been on the receiving end of some healing that I didn't know I needed. And it came through in a pretty miraculous way. And it did change me in a 20-minute time span. I wouldn't say that it was easy. It was sort of an awakening of sorts. There's a form of mediumship called trance healing. I don't know if you're familiar with it. So there's actually lots of different forms of mediumship. So there's mental mediumship, trance mediumship, physical mediumship, and there's even more than that, but I won't list everything out. So trance mediumship is a technique that I did training and development at the Oak Ridge Institute, which is a great place if people want to learn and grow in their psychic and mediumistic abilities. It's very down to earth, very practical, great community of people. And we did a trance mediumship exercise, and I was like, whatever. Like, I could talk about not being open. I was like, because I'm very much prove it. Like, prove to me. Like, I don't. It's my analytical mind. I just can't help it. I just don't take everything on board. I'm a critical thinker. Like, I always like, how does that work? And so we were paired up with another person and put into Zoom breakout rooms. And what the exercise was we allowed, this person I was working with did a healing on me, and she allowed her spirit guide to completely blend with her energy, that's a whole other conversation, but we all have spirit guides, and she allowed hers to blend fully with her, and I received the healing that they bestowed on me. And we just sit in silence for 20 minutes. So she gives me the healing, and I just sit there and be receptive. And like I said, I was really like, what the heck? Like, I don't know about this. But I still stayed curious and skeptical. I was open to it. And as we were sitting there, I had a deep welling of emotion, and I felt like a physical hand placed upon my heart. It was like someone touched me and there was nobody here. And then with that came this bloom of a deep fear and sadness swelled within me. And it was this fear and sadness that I had been storing in my body like my whole life, that I kind of knew was there, but not really. Like, because I'm great at compartmentalizing. I'm very resilient. I can compartmentalize and like get things done. And it bloomed within me. And I got the very clear message, like, you need to be with this. You need to acknowledge it. And then you need to let it go. And so it moved through me. I wept. I felt it like coming through me and me releasing it. And at the end, we came together and I felt like 10 pounds had come off of me. I felt like the way I viewed the world was different. I felt more compassion for myself, and I really had to acknowledge that I have historically been a very fearful person and had been moving from fear to a greater extent than I had thought. And it took me several weeks after that, and I had to go to my therapist, and I had to get support around where did this come from? Why did I carry it for so long? How can I honor this part of myself? Because you know what? Fear is a part of all of us. It's meant to be a part of all of us. It is not bad. It's in service to us a lot of the time. And it will never go away. People think, oh, anger, I'll conquer it. Fear, I'll conquer it. It's like, no, they're always going to be part of us. It's just, how do we move with that? And so that's what that healing taught me. And it was miraculous to me because it was a life-changing experience. Yeah. And so, and I've moved very differently in the world since that 20-minute trance healing session in a development class. So, I would say that sometimes, even if we think we're not ready for something or are skeptical about something or afraid of something, it doesn't necessarily mean that the door to healing is closed or not there. I do believe in miracles and miraculous things because I've seen and experienced so many. It's kind of hard for me not to at this point. That is it true that a lot of times we get in our own way, or we see other people getting in their own way? Yeah. But you know what? When I see that, I just say a prayer for a miracle, like that they'll get out of their own way and that they'll find their path. And I think that we've all been there. So I totally get it.
Absolutely, 100%. So many beautiful things covered there. And I mean, with the healing aspect of it, I think the critical part there to note is that you are actually open despite being skeptical. You were in the session, so part of you wanted to co-create the experience. Maybe not your conscious part, but your unconscious part for sure. And that makes a huge difference, because I would always, if someone is skeptical of how I work or what I do, and mine is science-based, a lot of the work I do with spiritual elements. If they're skeptical and they have an open mind, I'm more than happy to work with them, right? Doesn't matter if they're skeptical on the science aspect or my methods or the spirituality aspect, no problem. But if someone is close-minded, which is where you'll see some people find themselves because of experiences, because of the stories they picked up from someone else, that's when I feel the energetic link breaks down.
Yes.
And that's why perhaps you and I can feel that misalignment with someone, because if they're closed off, that means you're banging your head against the wall. There's nothing you can really do, and both people are wasting time. At least one person is wasting money, right? There's a lot of things that can be done differently. And and one of the things I was going to say as well, both you and I, in our mission statements, we have the word empower. So my mission statement is that I inspire and empower individuals to shine their light bright.
Yeah.
Now, you empower individuals through intuitive guidance. Now, why do I focus on the word empower there? Because what I've come to realize is that you can't empower someone that's disempowered. You first have to, if you're the person that's disempowered for whatever reason, and there's many reasons, trauma and many other reasons, you first have to get yourself to a place where you can find empowerment from others. So there's like a middle step, I would say, in between. So I found myself a long time ago looking to empower people that were disempowered, and I didn't realize why it wasn't working. It's because I was targeting perhaps the wrong people. I was looking to help everyone, which meant I was helping very few people or no one. Right. So it's very interesting to look at it that way as well. I am beyond excited that you are finding value and inspiration here. Your support means everything to us. If you're watching this on YouTube, take a moment to click like, subscribe, or leave a thoughtful comment below. And if you're listening on our podcast platform, subscribe or leave a review, and it would mean so much to us. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Unleash Thyself Today and TikTok at Unleash Thyself for daily insights and guidance on personal transformation. Your interaction helps others discover this content and fuels our mission to bring even more meaningful discussions your way. And on a personal note, I truly value and appreciate you and your thoughts. Now, let's dive back into this enriching exploration. There's so much more to uncover.
Yeah, I'm letting that sink in and take on board. And it was interesting because as you were saying that, I feel like being empowered, you're right, it's a multifaceted thing. Obviously, I feel like there's a lot of things. There's personal empowerment, right? There's empowerment in whatever comes with our socioeconomic status and background, right? Because there's all kinds of issues in the world today that keep some people down and lift other people up. I'm very well aware of that. But for me, empowerment is something we're already empowered. Everybody already is. It's just, do I see it? Do I know it? Do I believe it? Do I believe that I have the power within me? And I think maybe you would agree with me. I feel like the answer is like, you always have it. Like I mentioned earlier, your intuition's always been there. It's never left you, and it will never fail you. It's always going to be a part of you. But going back to that idea of the sphere of awareness, does your awareness allow room for you to make that connection? Is your awareness full of, I'm not empowered, I can't, I won't, I don't know how, I don't have the right people, like, with a narrative that's, like you said, creating a bit of a, I don't want to necessarily say block, but it doesn't leave any room for hope. It doesn't leave any room for belief. And I think it can be a big leap for some people to recognize that they do have power and autonomy. And I know for me, I did not feel empowered for the majority of my life. And there's a lot of good reasons why that was. I didn't necessarily go, well, I'll give you an example. So as a young person, I didn't go to college right away because I didn't feel, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't have any way to pay for that. I'm not empowered. I'm not empowered by money, because I used to think that money was power. It still is, in my opinion, in a lot of ways. But I was just like, no, I can't do any of these things because I don't have, or I don't have access to. And so I just built a whole life around working a bunch of part-time jobs and barely getting by because I wasn't empowered. That's the story I told myself, is you can live like this, Emily. This is how you have to live. You don't have access to higher education. You're a poor person. You don't have access to these things because of XYZ. And so I created this narrative and this structure for myself to live in. And then one day, I don't even know why I don't really know how this came about. Call it divine intervention or just an awakening. But I thought, oh my God, this isn't true. I don't have to do that. I don't have to do this anymore. I can find a way. I can find a way to do the things that I want to do. It might not be as easy as it is for other people, but if I want to, I can and will find a way. And I did. And that's what I've been doing pretty much ever since. And is it easy? No. Is it sometimes uncomfortable? Yeah. Do I get to bypass because I'm a psychic medium or an intuitive and I kind of get a sense of things coming down the road? Does that mean I get to bypass hardship? Absolutely not. It just comes for me like it does for everybody else. But I think empowerment is, I know how to move through that. That's what makes me feel empowered, and that's what I want to offer to other people. We're going to have high highs and low lows and everything in between. But if you know who you are and you know what your values are and you know what matters to you, you can move through it from an empowered space.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And what I would add there, which is pretty much what you said, is empowered to me also stands in line with the idea that when you realize you are the creator of your own life
Mm-hmm.
and you can create anything you want, which is exactly what you're talking about, your aha moment. Well, I mean, that gives you all the power you want. That empowers you in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
So then when you stumble upon someone that specializes in empowering others, like you or myself or
Mm-hmm.
others, they can just build on top of the foundation you've started with, right? And you just need a bit of
Absolutely.
guidance.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're the person that believes that everything happens to them, that the world conspires against them, that they don't have any say in it, right? There's no free will. And I've earlier in my career as a mentor and coach, this is many years ago now, I worked with people like that. And, if that's their view, it's not our job to change their mind. It's just plant seeds and then maybe eventually they'll germinate, right? Like in your case, for example, I would imagine when you woke up that day and you had the aha moment, it's likely that you have had some seeds planted that finally had the right
Mm-hmm.
environment to blossom into these beautiful
Mm-hmm.
realizations, which is your aha moment. And it's the same with these people because now 5, 6, 7 years later, I see some of them being stuck in the same mentality and they haven't really progressed through life. In fact, they regressed. And then others that have blossomed because those ideas that were planted by me and many others, they blossomed and now they can be empowered and they empower themselves.
Yeah, and I really like the analogy of the seeds being planted because one of the pillars of I believe I believe that we're not separate from nature. I think we've become more
We're
separate from
not.
nature because of our lifestyles, but we need water, we need food, like we need to take care of Mother Earth
Yep.
because she sustains us. Um, but I like to work with the seasons and the shifting of the seasons. And I always ask people, well, when the seasons shift, so do you. So we're coming upon a big shift in the wheel of the year on, I believe it's the 20th this year of June, where we get the longest day of the year. It's the summer solstice. And so I always ask people, like, if the solstice is coming and the longest day of the year is coming, how are you feeling? And how is what's shifting in the natural world? Well, what's shifting in you? Because we have seasons too. Seasons where maybe we're more introspective, seasons where we're
Mhm.
more feel more empowered than others. There's an ebb and a flow to all forms of life. Everything is not go 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 all days of the year, right? And so I know for
Very true.
me, this is when I kind of sit back and become reflective because I've planted the seeds, I've nurtured the seeds, and now I always say in the summertime here in the northern hemisphere anyway, I become the cat in the sunspot where the sun is warming my skin, I become reflective. I'm tending to things, but I'm also just watching to see how they'll go, right? I'm like, okay, I've done all this maybe hard work in the spring and fall. We'll have and summer for me is when I sort of step back and nurture and watch. And that isn't the case for all people. Some people are very active in the summer, because it's sunny, there's places to
Yeah,
go,
man, it's
people to see.
different.
I slow down. I tend to slow down in the summer. So I do like using nature analogies and like you mentioned, what seeds got planted in me that caused my awakening. Because I think if we connect with that, then we start to connect with when do seeds tend to get planted in our life? What are those quote seeds? Where did they come from? Things like that. So, nature is a
Yeah,
huge
because that's
part.
when it's
Yeah.
important to connect yourself when you realize that with the right people in your
Hmm.
environment, right? That's why it's
Absolutely.
important for you to go out and be in nature because, like you
Hmm.
said, we are not separate from it. We're part of nature. I mean, even our homes are in nature. Like, there's nothing separate
No.
from nature, even though in our minds sometimes it may appear that way. And when you start surrounding yourself with people that empower themselves and empower you versus disempower you, like
Yeah.
always putting you down, being negative, always
Hmm.
talking about the worst thing that's possibly happening on the news or in their life. When you make those choices, you start to see a lot more seeds getting planted and a lot more seeds blossoming because they have the right environment.
That's
And it may
yeah.
not be immediate; it might take a few months or a few years, but
Yeah.
you'll start to see the ripple effects.
Yes.
significantly faster. And, there's a saying that goes like, I don't know what speaker said, it's like you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Yeah, I've definitely heard that too. And when I was growing up, my mom used to say to us, I have 3 sisters, she would always say to us, girls, you need to be very careful about who you spend your time with, because that's going to make up your life. It's going to influence your life. And so surround yourself with people that share your values, that, treat you well and treat others well. And I didn't get it. I was just like, whatever, hang out with whoever and do whatever. And I wasn't mindful about that. And she was right. She was right. So I definitely learned that lesson. And the reality is sometimes we surround ourselves with people that maybe aren't the best for us because of a sense of not being worthy, or, you know what I mean? Again, some kind of story or something that's being told from within. There's a part of ourselves that thinks, well, this is all there is, or this is what's available to me. Sometimes we're forced to be around people because they're our family and we don't have a way to get away from them. And so that's a very real thing, is like, we don't always get to choose who we have to be around. For example, if you're working a job and you have to work with somebody who's a jerk, right? Then you got to set really healthy boundaries when you're working with that person so that their attitude doesn't have a huge effect on you, right? And that's where I think cultivating strong and healthy boundaries when you have to be in situations where maybe you do have to interact with people you'd rather not. But young people often don't have a choice in that. Sometimes it could be a parent.
I disagree with that. I mean, let's actually break down, because I love that, the power of choice, right? To me, the idea that we don't have a choice is an illusion, and I'll explain why, and I'm curious to see your take, because everything is a perspective, right? If someone is being a jerk at work, and I've dealt with a lot of people, both as a leader and being under leader like this, right? So most people listening would agree with that statement. And what I have found fascinating, both from my own personal experience and the ones I've mentored and coached, is that even though they have a toxic relation with someone, when they themselves change their perspective and how they act, all of a sudden, by some magic, the other person seems to change, despite really nothing else changing but yourself. Which meant you made a different choice that was a lot harder to make than anything else. And you didn't see it as a choice. So I believe, like when you were saying, that younger people don't have a choice, perhaps it's not the choice that they can see yet. Perhaps it's not the choice that feels easy or that feels doable.
Yeah.
But I do believe we all have choices. It's just much harder to sometimes see them or agree that that's a choice to begin with.
Yeah, and I would there's a bald eagle flying right outside my window.
That's a good sign.
I know, yeah, they're very big and they're very beautiful. There's 2 things I would say to that. Young people who are minors and they have to live in a household with parents who are destructive probably don't have a choice. So when we're little and we're at the mercy of the adults around us, this is where certain traumas, beliefs, and behaviors get instilled in us.
Yeah.
And we don't necessarily have a choice about that. We're in our developmental stages. We're in an environment where we can't necessarily remove ourselves because we're children. So in that sense, I point that out because a lot of people experience that. And as a result of it, get things in their head and build mechanisms of behaviors to keep themselves safe, secure. And those can work really good when they're in that environment growing up to protect them. And then they take them with them into adulthood when they do have choice, perhaps, and can make changes, but they don't realize that those mechanisms have outlived their function. Like they're not helping them out. But as an adult, that's why I was bringing up boundaries. So that's a really interesting thing about choice, and this is the way I view it, which I don't really think is that different from yours. If I have to be in an environment with somebody where I know they're probably not going to change their behavior, and I can't just not be around them anymore, that's when I'm going to accept them for who they are as they are and put myself in situations where I can have successful interactions with them, if that makes sense. Boundaries. So I'll say, yeah. So it's
your perspective, right? It's essentially what you end up doing, right? Because it's not about changing them because you can't change them. Yep. It's about changing you and yourself in perspective. And what's
Yes.
really interesting, what you touched upon there as well, is that we talked about co-creation earlier.
Mm-hmm.
So as harsh as it may sound, or hard as it may sound, the younger person going through a situation where they feel like they have no choice, if you're co-creating throughout your life, I mean, that means you're co-creating in that moment as well. As harsh as this may seem. And that was something that it took me a while to really wrap my head around. How can someone co-create abuse, right? Why would you even do that? And I mean, personally, I believe now that we all come here for various reasons in this life, various purposes. And sometimes we have to go through some very challenging things in order to be able to help others overcome theirs once we are able to help ourselves out of the situation. And it could be, decades later, like you see many trauma survivors, like really difficult stuff, that now they go on to be these amazing healers and mentors and inspirational figures because they've been able to really deal with it. Many, unfortunately, don't get to that point. But that's how I see this as well, because if you're co-creating, the example we gave earlier, co-creating, let's say, through the mediumship and with your client, I mean, you're co-creating everything in life. That means from the moment you're born till you die.
Yeah, I don't know that I necessarily share that perspective for a couple of reasons, but I know that I know that I'm familiar with that viewpoint, and I say, fair enough. But when I look at that through the broader lens of like slavery in America, Black folks from Africa, they didn't choose to be slaves in America, and they didn't, I don't think they're co-creating that for their existence. The same with the indigenous peoples of the Americas and the genocide of wiping out an entire population. I don't feel that they had any hand in that, nor did they co-create that. However, on an individual basis, as I am moving through my life and leaning back into that empowerment statement when we were talking about empowerment, why some people might not feel empowered and why some people do, I think there's just some nuance there, and I'm really open to exploring those kind of nuances. And I do think sometimes things just happen. They just happen to us and they just occur, and then we have to deal with it and move on. And that's to me where I can have some power and influence over. I had this thing happen to me. It was terrible. I've gotten out of it, and I can maybe cultivate a way forward that feels empowering to me, if that makes sense.
Well,
And that's
it does, and I love your take there. And I mean, I don't think any of us has the answer, right? Like it's whatever.
No, it's complicated.
We've run into. But let me ask you this: a question that comes up, and the examples you gave with slavery and the indigenous people. I mean, such beautiful examples, yet very tragic, right? I mean, same with World War II and World War One and all the big wars and the earthquakes and the tsunamis and all the things where people, innocent people are dying, and how are they co-creating that? And what comes up as soon as you're talking now, what came up for me from my intuition was to ask you a question. We just talked that we are all part of nature. We are not individuals. So when we co-create, aren't we co-creating for the greater good? As difficult as that may sound, that's what came up for me. And it's like the first time it actually came up that way.
Yeah.
So yes, maybe, on an individual level, I'm not co-creating this particular terrible thing, but when I extrapolate to a more global level, it is for a bigger reason that I clearly don't understand. And I do believe personally that we come into this life knowing the type of things we might go through and what we might have to experience. It's almost like you're signing up and say, yeah, you know what, I'll go take on the shitty job. Yeah. Someone has to do it, and it's, a lesson I have to learn.
Right. Yeah, I've definitely heard that perspective too. Well, part of the reason I'm curious, and I'm always exploring the idea of co-creation, and just like the conversation we just had, is I think that it makes people feel like they have control. Like I'm co-creating, so I have some control or influence over things. But control is truly an illusion. Like we get lulled into having a sense of control over things because our day-to-day lives might have some consistency. But I do think that that control is an illusion. And the ultimate, something that I feel is very true, is that we're humans and we're flawed. we're all to some degree hopelessly flawed. And so we try to set good intentions and to quote co-create for the greater good, but we are humans and we all have our flaws and deficiencies, right? No one's perfect. And so I think part of the co-creation is doing that deep self work to see where can I do better? How can I do better? And it means making mistakes, owning up to them, acknowledging them, and then trying again, and then doing better
Let me
next
ask you,
time.
is there such a thing as a mistake?
Yeah, I've made them.
Really?
I'm pretty sure.
I mean,
I've done things. I would say I've done things
let
I
me
wish I
rephrase. Let me
hadn't.
rephrase. Okay, but if you look at them, did they not teach you something? Every single one. Did they not bring you to where you are
Yeah.
today? Every single one.
Yeah, it's interesting because I work with the moon cycles, and on every full and new moon, I always pull 3 tarot cards, and this is what I do on my podcast, and it brings up like a theme on the human experience. And it's funny we're talking about mistakes because the one for the last full moon was on regret, and how regret and things that we might regret or be ruminating over things we wish we hadn't done can actually be a powerful force for change. It can actually be a healing energy, that sense of, God, I wish I didn't do that. I made a mistake. In that moment and in that feeling, there is some medicine there for us. There is some wisdom that can be gained from it, but there are some things that cannot be undone, healed, or mended, right? If the other person doesn't want that, or there are just consequences that reverberate to such an extent that it can be quite overwhelming. And I think it can be hard to come back from certain things. So I do think I have been dwelling on regret and mistake for like the last couple of weeks and thinking about how it moves through all of us and what we can do with that those particular experiences and the parts of us that are feeling shame, embarrassment, all the guilt over things we've said and done, and how we can offer some compassion to those parts of ourselves in the hopes that we can do better next time. If we live in the past, if we live in regret, we're not moving forward. We're not looking to the future, and we're not going to be able to do better the next time.
Of course,
Yeah.
of course. I mean, I know we're way past our, you know what, I would normally do an episode, but I love the conversation and how deep we're going. And I mean, we could go about this for another hour or so at least.
Oh, yeah.
And what comes up for me, and maybe we'll try to wrap up on this note, and I'm curious to see your take,
Sure.
and I guess I'm looking to see how to phrase this properly.
Right.
If I'm a creator, right, and we agree that we are creators in our own lives, and we are all these powerful beings, souls having a human experience, again, that's my belief. That means that everything that we're doing is created by us to some degree. So all those mistakes that, or things that happened in the past that we regret, and I've had plenty in my life, by the way.
Same
I've
here.
also had to go through the same process you had to understand how to love those parts of me, to have compassion, to forgive, right? Forgiveness is the big word here.
Right.
And realize that if you look at, again, we talked about perspective, everything, like if you change your perspective, then you literally can change something good into something bad and something bad into something good.
Yeah.
Because from my perspective, you cannot, everything that's in this world right now, you can always find either a negative side to it or a positive side to it. Even the darkest things that happen, even the best things that happen, there's always a different side to it. So if that's the case, if let's say because I personally haven't been able to find the scenario in which you take the best thing that happens and there's not a positive, and you take the worst thing that happens and there's not, the best thing and there's no negative, and the worst thing and there's no positive.
Gotcha.
But I haven't found one. And then I look at my life and I'm like, can I look the same way at the quote-unquote failures or mistakes or things I've started to regret or have shame around? Because shame is another big one, right?
Oh, yeah.
Or judgment. And you know how easy it is or it easily becomes to break those down? I mean, it's or simple rather, right? It's not easy because it's still, could be painful, could be emotional, could require a bit of work, but it's very simple to break them down once you realize that what's standing in your way is your own perspective of things. You change your perspective, you change your life.
Yeah, I think you used the word perspective in a way that I would use the word awareness. What am I aware of? How do I perceive this? How can I make room for other ideas or perspectives to come into my awareness? Why do I hold on to certain things over others? So I like to lean into the principles of attachment and aversion, which I learned from reading the Bhagavad Gita. I read
Hmm.
lots of spiritual texts, and I was really interested in that. Why do we get really attached to certain beliefs or things or people, and why are we so averse to others? And this is part of a lot of spiritual traditions. And how do I learn to walk the middle path? And so for me, it's the middle path, finding the middle way, the sacred middle, where it's not a binary, this or that, good or bad.
Yep.
It is what it is. It's
Yes.
happened, it's
Yes.
occurred, and how do I refrain from becoming attached to something that might cause harm, a belief about myself or others, or an aversion to maybe hope or healing, those parts or something like that.
But
So,
isn't that even relative, causing harm? Because I mean, of course, there are different levels of it, but through causing, so like when someone caused harm to me, let's say they
mhm,
broke my heart, they broke up with me, they fired me, they
mhm.
did whatever. How many times do we know hear stories of how that was in the greatest good of someone?
Oh gosh, yeah.
So, right, it's still relative. It's like, so it's like when we put ourselves in the situation to start labeling things and be very like, like put boxes around stuff. I
Yeah.
feel like that's where it breaks apart
Yeah.
for us as human beings, and that's where we catch ourselves in some hot waters.
Yeah, that's why I always return to the phrase, and it's kind of like an affirmation for when I feel very polarized or blended or an intense emotion. I'll say to myself, can I accept what is as it is in this moment and just be present for it? And without analyzing it, without dissecting it, but just being very fully physically present with my emotional feeling body, allowing myself to feel what I need to feel. And that again sounds simple, but for me, I tend to think my feelings rather than feel my feelings. So it's radical presence, and it's radical acceptance. And that doesn't mean rolling over and not standing up for things that we should stand up for, right? When we see something being done to someone we know that's harmful, like, I'm not going to stand for that. But it's not rolling over. It's accepting the moment. So if in the moment you see something being done to someone and you know you have to do something, then you accept that you have to do it. Then you do it. If you see in a moment that you need to take a step back, or that you're going to cause harm through word or deed, you accept that you need to step back and then you do it. So it's an interesting thing, and I think that's why I love to like read and study different spiritual texts and things like that, because everybody's got a perspective on this, and I find them all quite fascinating and very interesting, just as I have found yours to be really stimulating. And I'm definitely going to be thinking about some of the things that we talked about in this conversation. It's certainly lots of food for thought. And I think that's why, the podcast is so awesome, is because you're bringing up all kinds of things for us to think about. And you know what? We don't have to have all the answers, right?
No
We
one
can
does,
talk
right? That's
about
the
it. Yeah.
beauty.
Yeah. We can talk about it and explore different perspectives, as you would say, and kind of see what comes of that. And I think that conversation is a great way to do that. I think it's a great way to open up new ideas and new possibilities and just explore. So I love exploring through conversation,
And
and you've
plant those
definitely
seeds,
got me
right?
thinking. Yeah, planting the seeds. That's right.
Right? You do it for
Absolutely.
me, I do it for you, and then the audience gets in there as well. It's beautiful, Emily. I mean, this has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank
I'm sure
you.
we can do a part 2 and 3 to dive a bit deeper in some of these topics. I
Absolutely.
guess I'll ask you one last question before I let you go here, really quick. Do you ever do anything on a podcast where you do some of your magic? I say magic, and not to be labeling anything, but because it's something special. That's how I see magic. But
Well, if you mean psychic or mediumship readings, I haven't done that. There are people who do, and the main reason I haven't done those specific things is because you never know what will come up, and it might be something someone doesn't, because I don't really have control over what comes up. It might not be something that it could be very vulnerable, is what I'm trying to say.
be.
But I did do a podcast with someone, and we did do an intuitive exercise with how to shift awareness. And he said it was really awesome. So we did that together, and I was like, well, this is how he's like, well, how do you do what you do? And I was like, I can show you how I do it. Like, it's just a technique. Do you want me to get you to do it too? And then we did that, and he was like, oh my God. I'm like, yes, so you're an intuitive too. And it's just these techniques that I've learned about how psychics and mediums expand their awareness to become hyper receptive and can this is something there's a reason people study the brains of psychic mediums, because it's fascinating and nobody's really nailed it down. It's how does it work? How do we get the information? And part of me is like, it doesn't matter because it comes. But the other part is like, it does feel like it's all there. You just open your awareness and then it just comes to you, and there's no effort. There's really no effort on my part other than becoming passive and receptive. And then all the information just comes in. So I have done an exercise with somebody where we did that, and I think he was pretty surprised at what happened for him.
I'm always interested in something two things here, right? The reason I asked the question is because you're playing in a field where there has been a lot of misinformation and misguidance and misuse, right? So by showing how it's done the proper way, your way, they can help bridge the gap with people. And then, of course, the exercise you're talking about is something that people can take and use right away. So there's value in both of those.
The other thing I wanted to tell you is that mediums like me, and I haven't done this yet. I haven't had the opportunity to do this yet, although I'm building up to it. I'm building up my confidence to be able to do this. There's something called platform mediumship, where mediums will have a group of people come, paying a very small fee, because it's not really about the money. Usually to pay the rent for the venue that they're doing this at. And platform mediumship is where the medium will be in front of a group of people, tap in and just start giving information and see who can take it. And that's a way that mediums can demonstrate their skill and ability in front of a lot of people, and how it should be ethically and evidentially done. Without costing anybody an arm and a leg. So a lot of, I don't actually see that happening as much where I'm at. I don't know if it happens in other places, but platform mediumship used to be really popular. And my first experience with it was actually on the Oprah Winfrey Show as a kid. I saw a couple of mediums, James Van Praagh, John Edwards, you hear these names. And now there's Tyler Henry, the Hollywood medium, who had a Netflix show, who they're the real deal, and they're really demonstrating, I think, the work pretty well. And I think that's why they do that work, is because they want people to see, this is how it should be. And they'll always say, don't give me any information beforehand. It makes my job harder. And then they'll just tap in and say, who has someone on the other side named da-da-da-da, and they just start bringing information, and somebody will be like, I can take that. And then they end up just reading for that person. So that's something that I'm working towards. I'm a little bit scared to do it, but someday I do intend, and it is an intention that I hold, to do demonstrations for groups of people so that they can see how ethical and evidential mediumship can work. But right now, usually I just do it in private sessions through the Oak Ridge Institute, and the cost is very, very low, because I'm a relatively new medium. I've only been doing mediumship for 3 years, which sounds like a long time, but it's actually really not. And I didn't know I was a medium until about 4 years ago. I didn't know I could do it. And it came up in a psychic session, and a client was like, I think you're communicating with someone from the other side. And I was like, no, I don't know how to do that. I'm not a medium. I don't do that. And then it was like, well, I guess you can. And that was at that point, I was like, I need somebody to help me cultivate this skill set. I just didn't want to be accidentally and inconsistently bumping into it. But it was pretty surprising when it happened, because I didn't even know it was happening. I just was trying to go with the flow. And hindsight being what it is, I do realize what happened and why it happened. But it was quite a surprise to me. And I think that's why I tell people, I really believe we can all do these things, because Like, wasn't a kid that went around seeing or sensing spirit to the degree that maybe some other people were. It was something that occurred to me, oh my gosh, in my late 30s. So I'm 43 now. It was in my late 30s. I was like, oh my gosh, I can do this. Oh my gosh, that's scary. Do I know what I'm doing? And so that's where a community came in for me. So finding people that knew how to do this, a safe community to learn and grow, became critical, because who was I going to practice on, right? Like, if I didn't have community. So yeah, that's how I would answer that.
Now, with that being said, Emily, we will wrap up here. I mean, that's so much awesome information, so much good conversation. I want to thank you for being on the show.
Thank you.
We'll have your information in the notes. People can find you there. And I mean, we'll have you back on the show if you want to come back, and we'll have deeper conversations.
You bet.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us on this exploration of personal transformation. Your presence and engagement are at the heart of what we do, and I sincerely appreciate you, your time, and thirst for knowledge, inspiration, and empowerment. Please consider showing your support by hitting like, subscribe, leaving a comment, or writing a review. Your engagement not only fuels our mission, but also helps others discover these insights. For more daily guidance on personal transformation across the mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical realms, be sure to visit our website at unleashthyself.com. You can also find us on Instagram at Unleash Thyself Today, TikTok and YouTube at Unleash Thyself, and there we post daily content designed to inspire and empower you on your journey. If you have any specific thoughts, questions, or feedback, I truly value your input. I would love to hear from you. Together, we're building a community united in authenticity and purpose. Once again, thank you for being a part of this movement. Until next time, continue to embrace your true self and live a life on purpose, with purpose. See you in the next episode.